How's it going, everybody? Welcome back. Yeah, this weekend was the Kansas Materia Cup. I'll have a full top cut deck breakdown kind of as soon as we get access to all those decks. I'm sure they'll be up on FFTCG at some point in the near future. But in the meantime, I kind of wanted to talk over my deck decision, what I ended up bringing, why I brought it, what's different in this versus the North Carolina one, and just kind of give a little bit of a rundown of the day. So I ended up 4-3 after Swiss, which it's not bad. I knew going in that probably the Swiss rounds would be the hardest rounds, given that not having knowledge of what my opponent is on means that I can't tailor my game plan, knowing whether to keep a card like Noctis, for instance, in an opener. Like, there are hands against aggro where keeping Noctis is better than Norstallin, but I don't know that, so usually I'm going to blind take a hand with Norstallin in it. But I did think that this was the deck that gave me the best chance to do well inside of Top Cut. I expected the most common deck in the event to be Refia Control. I was actually incorrect in that it was Knights. But the other deck that I was considering was a Refia Control list. I think it's the best deck in the format. If not tied with Gigawall. Gigawall might actually be better, especially with some of the innovations that were kind of run this list by KP, which incredible list, by the way. Seriously, one of the best sets of innovations on the deck. I had some similar ideas, and it was kind of fun talking with KP at the event a little bit and seeing that we actually had come to some similar conclusions about Gigawall, but there were some things that he was doing that I had considered but written off as a meme, but clearly very, very strong. So yeah, I took retainers, and the reason I took retainers over Refia Control, I was a little worried because this is at this point Retainer Storm is the Ghoul deck. This is the deck that if Ghoul is in a big tourney, he is playing this deck probably. Uh, it's a little unfortunate, but I didn't really think that mattered that much. I don't think there's a lot of people that play this deck to the level that I play it, and that's not meant to be a knock against anyone else or me tooting my own horn. It's just no one else practices this list. So I figured that even if a lot of my matchups might be 45-55, this deck has the tools to beat any deck. There are no really unwinnable matchups. Something like, 13 into Mono Wind, or Mono Wind over traditional Mono Water, things like that. I didn't think there was a situation that this deck couldn't handle. I do think that Rufus Rug and Gigawall are 40-60 matchups. They can be a little rough, particularly depending on what the openers on them are. But this deck does stabilize very well into those. If it gets slightly lucky at the right times, and it's very consistent and very strong. I figured with Refia Control, I'd be playing a lot of mirror matches that I wasn't necessarily going to be the better pilot of. And I also thought that the version of Refia Control I was playing was favoring consistency over a lot of other things. But I did think that a lot of other builds would actually have the advantage in the mirror match in some ways. So I really liked the concept of this list as, again, it doesn't have any auto loss matchups. So let's kind of do the card by card. So first things first, the Storm Engine. 2 copies of Luso, 2 copies of Zidane, 2 copies of Rosa, 3 copies of Lulu. 1 copy of Rydia in the forwards as just kind of an alternate way to kind of get 2 casts. Generally, Rydia, I don't think really did that much or stuck to the board very long, but the Luso, the Zidane, the Rosa, and the Lulu are all very, very strong. Rosa might be a card to consider putting at 3 in this list in the future, but this deck is very tight for slots, and you really only need 1 of Rosa or Atomos to stick to the field. For the Retainer Engine, it's the exact same as it was in North Carolina. 3 copies of Noctis, 2 copies of Prompto, 2 copies of Gladiolus, 1 copy of Ignis. Ignis was a damage magnet all day, which is a little bit crappy, but I still don't think you can afford to run him at more than 1 copy in this list. You don't really want to be breaking your backups until you're set up. But it is nice to be able to draw 2 off a Prompto or have Noctis kill 2 things. For the other utility forwards, there's really just the two. There's one copy of Golbez, which I think was actually a really neat concept. Effectively, what I realized was that Cloud LB is maybe the best card in the game. So I wanted a EX Burst Lightning card so that I could, if it got hit into damage, I had something useful, but I also had access to Cloud. And I wanted it to be searchable off of Tyro, so the Tyro EX Burst represented the ability to Cloud on the Crackback. So Golbez ended up coming in as the best EX Burst Lightning card forward that I would consider actually also even casting. Being able to search out a Prompto or a Rydia or an Iris or a Chocobo or a Kusith is very strong. Even searching a Dryad on EX Burst sometimes can save you in the right matchup. I considered running the Wind Lightning Cloud at one copy. Wind Lightning Cloud coming in next to Noctis is like break 3 things, which is just it's incredibly strong. But I figured the chances of me, like, at that point, I probably won the game anyway if I'm casting the Wind Lightning card I'm running. I considered Man in Black as, like, an extra copy of Lulu as well. But, again, the EX Burst on Golbez was just more likely to be relevant. And it was relevant, and it was very good all weekend. Lastly, we had the Tori Kelly tax, one copy of Neo X Death. This card is not incredible, but I don't think you can really cut it. And I call it the Tori Kelly deck. I think Tori Kelly's deck is, for all intents and purposes, immune to this card. But there are a lot of those like really slow Earth monster decks that kind of just build up, Shinra you, and then kill you. And you just can't. Alexander is a great card, but you can only get it back 3 times with Lulu, really. So Neo X Death kind of is the way to deal with those decks as like the one of, and you have Tyro to get to it. You have the Kusys to pull it back if you discard it early. Ignis can pull it back. It's just good enough to justify the slot. One thing to note though that is a little annoying is that the choose 2 backups is mandatory, so you can't cast it like for an emergency Noctis ping. The other thing that's kind of nice is it is a very big thing to throw away at Kolka. Between Neo X Death and Gladiolus, I've got a lot of big beefy bodies for Kolka to throw at people. For the summons, we did make one change here. I went down to 1 copy of Alexander, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to get the 3rd Mist Dragon into the deck. I say I needed to. This card never showed up for me the entire weekend. I was running 3 in both of the lists that I played. And I never drew it. I did not draw this card often enough or powerfully enough, and the few times I did draw it, it didn't make a difference. I don't think I would not run it at 3. I think you pretty much have to. I think against stuff like the Earth, Water, Chaos list, against Gigawall, you just kind of have to take a turn off a Mist Dragon on occasion. It's a relatively cheap cast to get the Storm count up. It's good utility. It protects against the triple Amonts that were everywhere, potentially. Doesn't help against double Amount in a turn. More on that later. But yeah, no, this card was only in my hand a couple times, and it was never relevant in actual tourney matches. But I don't think that I can cut it down. Other than that, again, the 2 Azura. Mono Wind is on 3. I don't have room for 3, so I'm on just the 2. 1 copy of Alexander. 3 copies of Kusith. 3 copies of Chocobo. 1 copy of Dryad. There kind of gets a point with this deck where you kind of get ahead, but you still need to kill your opponent. And in those situations, Dryad ends up being very powerful to kind of cut off it kind of gives you interruptions. This deck's big weakness, if it has one, is how everything happens on my turn. There's very little, compared to like a traditional Mono Wind. I don't have Fina. I'm not on 2 copies of Dryad. I really have to either steal interaction with Zidane, or I have the 1 copy of Dryad, or I can rip the break zone with Mist Dragon, or bounce my stuff out of the way. And then lastly, 1 copy of 4 CP Alexander. This is just a generally good catch-all. Breaks Corilla, breaks Gigawall, breaks Ramza is actually a really big one to kind of keep popping if you can help it. And then also pops Atomos in the mirror. Just a good card. Monsters, whenever I want Atomos. Neither of them is searchable, but when you draw them, they're really good. When you don't draw them, you hopefully have access to whatever else you need. Backups, The only major change from North Carolina, I'm still on the 2 Iris, 1 Kolka, 3 Tilica, 3 Northstalin, 3 Vieira, but I cut the Cryo and the Stiltskin for 2 copies of Tyro, just trying to up that EX burst count, but also it gives me access to both Leo and Cloud. Tyro is also just generally good. Getting access to either Rosa or Lulu is really important, or being able to search Noctis as opposed to having to do the awkward thing with like a Noctis EX where like Noctis gets Prompto, Prompto gets Noctis, and then you still have to get another forward out on the field, which then just opens you up to getting blown out by a Shinryu. Tyro is just generally pretty good. It does mean that I kind of went down, quote unquote, one unique name on the backups. I always like to count this, and I was on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 backups, as opposed to being on 10 in North Carolina. But I think in this format, Tyro is just too good. For a while, I was on 3 Tyro, 2 Vieira. But I think Vieira is just maybe the best card in the backups in this deck. It just does everything. It digs. It allows you to get extra Ignis triggers. Playing this for 2 off of Tilica is just ludicrously strong. Especially if you like draw into Iris and you go like Northstalin, Tilica, Tilica for Vieira, Vieira finds Iris. Play the Iris for 1. Now I have 4 backups for the next turn, along with the Iris for the retainer package to kind of enable a storm turn. Iris again is maybe one of the more important backups. It's a card that like would be interesting to try to find a way to get to 3, but I just don't think there's room for it. She really is kind of the bridge though between the retainer engine and the storm engine, just because she turns the retainers into even cheaper casts than they already are. Prompto costs 1 off of Tilica, now he's free. Noctis costs 3 off of Tilica, now he costs 2. Gladio costs 2, now he costs 1. Or now he costs 0 actually. Ignis now costs just 3 instead, which is just a huge buff to all of these cards and allows you to really take some big turns. And then the Limit Break deck, 2 copies of Leo. It turns out a 2 CP cast that draws a card, pretty good. 1 copy of Shantoto. I've always been curious on like how often this would come up, and it actually did this weekend, but it is difficult. I'm only on something like 18 main deck Earth cards, so actually like pulling this off, I really think they should have made Shantoto 7 with 2 Earth pips, and just said like, yeah, because like it's such a cost to flip your whole LB deck anyway, that making it require nothing but Earth pips, locking her into just like a relatively mono Earth shell, I think it just is less healthy than this card should be. This card should be a stabilizing force against aggro, but she's so damn hard to get off that you just can't do it consistently. 1 copy of Mott. I will straight up say this is incorrect. This should be 2 copies. It turns out that having access to a 2 CP 9K for Noctis from the Limit Break deck is really good. When he hits the field, he gives all your power forward to 1,000 power. You can stack that where he gets the power before Noctis makes the fight happen. And I think this card is just generally very strong and fits very well with retainers. And in aggro matchups, getting access to 2 copies of this will matter, because then you can block the first Mott, put in the second one on the field, and then Noctis can just be a removal engine for you. 2 copies of Cloud, the expectation, you only need the 2, and there's not a better card to put in the slot. Just very good at stabilizing against aggro. It also is the thing that helps this deck handle the Refia control matchup. You can just they put the Refia down, you in response, Cloud them back, and I feel pretty good about it. 1 copy of Leela. She's not amazing, but she does solve a problem the deck can run into, which is Sid Randell. The outs to Sid Randell in the deck are Shantoto, Dryad, and Kolka. If any of those are not in my opener, though, and again, Kolka's a one-time use, unless I like Ignis it, and then Azura it, and then do it again. Dryad is a little tricky because it's a one-of that's effectively not searchable unless Golbez goes to damage. And then Shantoto is Shantoto. Leela kind of gives perpetual access to an out to the card, which is just good enough to be worth a slot, in my opinion. I cast her once on the weekend just because I could, but in general, she's just okay. I had one copy of Ace in here. This is where the what should have been the second copy of Mott. There's just no real situation where Ace is better than, just extra casts. In this deck in particular, I think Ace is actually like okay in mono wind, even if I think that there's a weird contradiction. I might have a discussion on just like either metagame as a whole or like limit breaks or even just like wind as an element right now and why I think it's in a very strange position that Ace doesn't necessarily help. But yeah, I thought there was like a world where it's like, oh, I have like 3 to 4 wind backups every Atomos. Ace can come in and do 7k as a cleave, and I can just kind of end the game that way. In practice, it's just better to like focus on the Noctis engine than it is to spend 8 CP on Ace. But I did not think the second Mott would come up as often as it did. So live and learn. And that's the list. Generally, like I said, other than the change with the Mott, I don't think there's that much I would change. I ended up 4-3. I won my first 3 rounds of Swiss, actually. I'm almost amazed my breakers weren't better. First 2 rounds were both against, local DFW players, which was really unfortunate. Round 1 was against Refia Control. Zidane went on a rampage. That was one of my only die roll wins on the day. It's the only one that I can remember actually winning. And Zidane put in just a ton of work for me. I guess, no, I won 2 die rolls. There's another one I know that I won later on. But that matchup can be a little finicky. We both got kind of set up very quickly. And Refia's late game is very strong. But Zidane stole a Refia, so I was only dealing with 2 Refias in the deck. And that made it a lot easier for Cloud to really kind of sweep up, the best card my opponent had. Round 2 was against Warriors of Darkness, against another friend. And he's relatively new to playing the deck, so there's just a lot of interactions he didn't see or know. And actually, I should have lost this game. I had a very timely ability to get Shantoto 1 turn. Then 2 turns later, I got a Luso 7 off. And then just kind of barely stabilized. But, I should have lost that game based on how I was drawing and how fast that deck was able to kind of push damage across. Round 3, that was the stream match that people saw against a pretty interesting build of Gigawall. If you want to, go to Collector's Cash's Twitch, give it a watch. Mike Byrne and forget who did the other commentary, but they did a fantastic job of kind of going over things and breaking things down. But it was a really fun match. My opponent was, fantastic, super lovely. He's like, yeah, it was just kind of fun watching you pilot the deck. But in general, I had just the right combination of cards at the right times. And the Gigawall revealing Axstar ended up being a big boon to me because it meant that I was only going to take 2 damage the next turn, as opposed to taking, 3 or 4 damage over those turns, which gave me just a lot of leeway to kind of take my time, get built up, and kind of make the push on my own terms. So round 4 was the last round before lunch break. I sit down, lose the die roll, and my opponent's on Mono Fire Gigawall. And they play Gigawall, and they reveal Moody plus Geomancer, so they end up with 3 backups, a big 9k forward, and 4 cards at hand. And a no Amaterasu, notably. So now I have to play through all of this with the understanding that my push turn is going to have to play through Amaterasu. And to be fair, I almost pull it off. He gets a Tyvus into play. Tyvus then deploys Ephirian. I'm like kind of back against the wall at this point. I get to my 4 backups. I go for my push turn. It's like I go Lulu for a summon, then Rosa, then Iris. And he Amaterasu's the Rosa 3rd cast trigger. And I go, okay. I have Every on field. Every can activate my Tilica. Tap my Tilica. Miss Dragon. 2nd Amaterasu. And I go, I'm in trouble. So I have the ability to get to 7 casts, but I absolutely needed to hit one of my 2 copies of Lucio off of a Chocobo, which is like a 1 in 10 chance. I missed it, didn't see it, lost that round. So we got a lunch break. I don't eat lunch at big tourneys. It's just I feel like I always lose. Honestly, if we could just skip having lunch breaks at tourneys in the future, I would love that because I swear I always lose the round after lunch break no matter what I do, which was the case for this one. So I sit down, my opponent sits down, okay, good luck, fist bump, lose at eye roll. Okay, whatever, no big deal. Keep my hand. I've got 2 Northstalins. I've got a Golbez if my opponent's on aggro. I have a Gladiolus, which is kind of dead, but that's fine. It's Earth CP. I can play my Tilica. And then I have, I think it was like an Alexander. And my opponent, draws the card for turn. Rufus. And I go, damn, okay. And I make a mistake here. I ditch Gladiolus. I should have ditched my second Northstalin, but, I just wasn't thinking. Usually Gladiolus is a pretty dead card if you need to do a early discard. And my opponent goes Rug, and I go, oh no, I'm in trouble. Because neither of these died a cloud, so my anti-aggro game plan is not live. And I've just ditched my second Earth card, so Noctis Gladio isn't live to kill Rug. I should have been prepared for this. This is 100% on me. I should have realized as soon as I see the Rufus that I need to hold the Earth cards. But I didn't, so I don't know if I win that match anyway. It's extremely difficult to stabilize when you take 2 damage, discard 2 cards before you have a chance to play the game. Again, no disrespect to my opponent. Came across very nice. I even got a second game in afterwards because the game went by so fast. But there's only so much you can do when before you start the game, you've already taken 2 points of damage and the game is effectively over. I did lose even the salty run back that we played. Despite Mistral getting a Don Corneo activation, but it is what it is. Like, there's only so much you can plan for. That's one of those matchups. Just like, it's unfortunate, right? I really do not like that combination existing. I feel like that should have been accounted for by the design team when they designed Rug, especially. Like, Rug being a 9K as well is extremely problematic because it's so difficult to remove a 9K. I can't Noctis for Prompto. I have to use Gladiolus, which is just more difficult to do. Ups the degree of difficulty for the matchup quite considerably. Round 5, or that was round 5. So round 6, I sit down, and I open my first hand. My only backup is Shantoto, which means I don't effectively have a backup. It's my other die roll win of the day. So I mulligan, put my hand back on the bottom, draw my card. Still have no backups. So I do the only rational play that I have, which is I just go turn 1, discard a card, play Zidane. Maybe Zidane will hold a backup. I'll get some information on what I'm playing against. And I flip a Chaos. And all of a sudden, I know exactly how my game plan needs to change for the rest of the game. I need to be a lot more careful. I need to commit, on my own time. I know I have time in the matchup. And I need to make sure that I have access to Chocobo whenever I commit to the field. Thankfully, the very next turn, I top deck my Northstalin. And Zidane starts really putting in some work. And my opponent, again, talked to them afterwards. Super, super nice individual. I was very happy to... Again, I love the community for Final Fantasy for the most part. So many incredible people to talk to at the event and learn from. But I believe his name was Zion. It's one of the ones I remember. But super, super fantastic individual. But yeah, they laughed afterwards because they didn't really know how to handle like such an early Zidane because their removal wasn't really online that early. And they don't want to overcommit to killing the Zidane. They ended up Shantotoing on, just the Zidane to get it off the field. And I didn't have any, I'm like, okay, great. Afterwards, we laughed because they didn't realize that my Rosa would have let them potentially do Stormish turns because they stole a Rosa with a Chaos at one point. And I didn't realize that I had Shantoto Chaos available to me. So we were kind of playing each other's decks in a really funny way, thanks to the way that the matchup worked out. But knowing the way that went through, knowing, afterwards, he's like, yeah, I don't really know if it would have been better to Gilgamesh and kill the Zidane. I'm like, almost definitely was better to Shantoto it, I think. Because the Gilgamesh is not really developing a threat that really matters to me. And he goes, yeah, probably. The cost was very similar. So just one of those things where it's like Zidane randomly won me the game by just both giving me the information. Also got a Levi Tarasu off of it, which was really funny. And then my final round, so this was my win and in, which apparently I haven't had great luck with my win and ins lately, but I'm up against Patrick Panetone, and Patrick is on Mono Wind, which is a matchup that is generally Mono Wind favored, but not by much, I would say, a lot of the time. I think people really underestimate that I actually do have a lot of. If you've never played a Mono Wind mirror, or wind cast mirror, Zidane ends up being the most obnoxious card because he represents Pot of Greed. And cards like Azura and Kusith mean that killing Zidane is almost actively bad if it's stolen. If they steal these cards, then killing the Zidane now says, well, they can cast the Azura, cast a backup, play Zidane, and Zidane draws 2 more cards again from your deck. And unfortunately for me, Patrick's Zidane hits were Azura, Iris, Kusith, Vieira, Rosa, Atomos, and then probably like maybe one more. And you can't play through that. And to be fair, he was teched in a way. Very smart deck building, actually. He was on 3 Zidane in his list because he noted what I did when playing Mono Wind, that the deck actually can kind of burn itself out right now by going through so many resources. Zidane allows you to just generate resources that aren't in your deck so you don't have as many issues with burning yourself out. It was a very smart deck list. And Patrick's a fantastic, player, fantastic pilot, very good at the deck, very experienced. But I dropped that one. Again, I would say that matchups like, 40-60 in Mono Wind's favor. Especially, and thankfully, like, I opened Nordstalin, so I had Nordstalin Tilica. If Zidane steals Tilica, the matchup's unwinnable for you. You can't deal with Mono Wind with Tilica. But yeah, like reviewing those losses, Monofire Gigawall, I don't really think there's much I can do about that. And I don't know that my other deck would have really won that matchup with the kind of start that my opponent had anyway. I think that maybe Bartzing for Refia, for Ferris Warrior of Light would have been okay. But I don't know that it stabilizes me enough to win into, especially Gigawall hitting Moody is so ridiculously difficult to play through. Round 5, like I said, I lost at I roll against Rufus Rug. And I do think that matchup is winnable, but going second into it makes it much, much, much more difficult. I was talking with Jake Lee afterwards, but playing into an aggro deck this format, or any format really, I noticed with 13, is that when you play against 13 or any kind of super fast, you're going to die on turn 3 deck. If you go first, you still are going to start by playing a backup. But if I play against those decks going second, taking the turn off to play that first backup doesn't usually work out. So it's almost like they get to Hecaton Shear your first backup if you go second against them, which is a massive deal. I'm a deck that really wants to play off of its backups as part of its resource game and its resource loop. So that was unfortunate. And then again, yeah, the last round, pretty much a mirror against a very skilled opponent. There's only so much I can do in that situation. I don't think Refia Control would have gotten me there on the day. I think that especially the Chaos Arc match, I probably would lose on the Refia deck. And I expected Refia to be hated out of the format a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I'll have a Top Cut breakdown at some point in the near future as soon as this get uploaded. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed the deck profile. Kind of going through my thought process and my decision. Again, congratulations to Kyle Peters for winning the event, and hope to see y'all in the next one.